So this is the first class of the Wednesday evening craft class for winter 2020. Woo! And this is the entire group except Jody, who I mentioned is skiing in Utah. So I guess still on the slopes or having some hot chocolate or something. Or something hot toddy. What you do after skiing in Utah. But
it is. Yeah.
Let's do a quick verbal introduction, just of your name and where in the physical world you are, and what, and then just briefly, not at length, but just, if you're working on something, you could say, and I'm writing fiction, or I'm working on a novel, or I'm writing all kinds of things, or it's a memoir, whatever you know about it, and again in brief, would be great. So Aline, you are in my top left corner. Will you begin?
Okay, my name is Aline Souls, and I write historical fiction, and I'm currently living in Danville.
Fabulous, thank you. And Catherine.
Yes, I'm working on fiction, and I live in Southern California, and I'm hoping for much from this class.
Well, wonderful, good.
Well, pressure.
Frances.
Frances DuPont. I live in Richmond and writing historical fiction. It's a biographical historical fiction set just before the Revolutionary War.
Yeah, fabulous. Eleanor.
I'm Eleanor Vincent. I live in Walnut Creek, and I just started a new memoir. I'm still shopping a novel, so that's project's not fully off the desk, but I'm moving on.
I highly believe that, marketing is such a separate thing.
Right.
And editing, I don't know if anyone's been listening to my podcast, the thing I've come upon is there's so much waiting to get feedback. I've decided I have to work on something else even while I'm waiting for feedback, because it's just, otherwise, it seems as if the writing's out of our hands, and it's the part we love.
Yeah, exactly.
So, bravo for starting the next one. I think Julia is dealing with her dog sitter, so let's go to Felicia, please.
Hi there. I'm Felicia, and I'm in Oakland, California, and I'm writing fiction, novel, memoir, and short story. Ongoing, endless stories.
Wonderful. That's what we want, right? And Sue.
So I'm Sue. I live in San Francisco, south of Market, and I'm working on a memoir of my almost 5 years in Australia.
Great.
And I'm doing book in a year, so yay.
Yes. And Julia, we're just saying, our names, where in the world we are, and what kind of genre or project we're working on.
Okay. My name's Julia. I'm in the Mission in San Francisco, and I write fiction and poetry. Fiction's new to me, and I'm working on Book in a Year with the Book in a Year group.
Yay.
A novel.
Yeah. Well, this is a fabulous group, and Jody is in my Tuesday class and doing this one as well, and she's wonderful, but she'll be here hopefully next time. So great group. And we're going to dive in with the topic of yearning, because, and one of my favorite books is anyone who's been to Sonoma County Writers Camp, which by the way is enrolling right now, so go to SonomaCountyWritersCamp.com, a little advertisement. But I love early morning writing from where you dream, which is the title of Robert Owen Butler's book, and he really talks a lot about yearning as kind of the heart of story. And yearning, what does your character want? It connects to motivation, it connects to emotion, and then that it also leads to change, because a character who is really yearning, right? Yearning just has such a deep emotional, like way deep down sense to it, right? It's not just, oh, I want this, or, oh, I'd like this. Like if you want something, it's like, oh, you want a glass of water, maybe you get it. That's not really a story. Maybe you don't get it and you have to start hunting, and maybe it starts becoming more of a yearning, and then maybe there's no water left and now we're in a story, right? But yearning is, as I say here, is the beginning of story. because a character who's yearning for something will be driven to take action. Maybe not everybody who's yearning will be driven to take action, but probably everyone who takes action is yearning for something. And that yearning can lead to risky actions, actions that are out against character or push a character outside of their comfort zone or against the character's sense of self-interest. And those are the kind of actions that will then change people, right? And that's really what story is about. So yearning is the seed of that. So I thought it was a great place to launch. And then also because I think, people talk a lot about likability in their questions about, the sexism of the concern about likability and all of that. But what I've found is that characters who take action on their own behalf tend to be likable in some way, that a lot of likability, I mean, I haven't heard people talking about this, but I just noticed that a lot of likability issues are sometimes really about maybe not taking action. So I don't know, you can test that theory, but I think characters making things happen, having to make things happen because their yearning drives them, is exciting, engaging. And then instead of letting obstacles or impossibility stop them, they get creative, they get experimental, they take risks, they find a way around it. So, and then how they do that is going to reveal character, it's going to shape story. All right, so that's where we're starting. The other thing I want to say is I made a little note in italics at the top of the page. And so, because I'm doing something different, which is I'm going to teach a different set of exercises in this class than I taught in the Tuesday, Thursday class. I mentioned I sent you guys the video. You guys will do the Tuesday, Thursday exercises, or at least some of them, as many as you can in your, in the alternate week hour, plus on your own, whatever you want. But those are going to be, the material for the alternate week session, which Felicia is graciously running, facilitating and participating in. So yay! And she's wonderful. And so you'll get all the exercises. You'll see all the exercises, and we're going to do the ones marked W with me. Okay. I think, let me just make sure everybody knows all the rules. There are two. Anyone want to shout one out?
Right.
Right. Yes. The number one rule is to write. And what that means is we're going to talk about stuff, like I just gave a little spiel about yearning. We're going to look at examples. We're going to talk about ideas. We're going to talk about craft. And it's can be a little bit heady sometimes. I think it's exciting, but also heady in the sense of maybe, up here, meta. Drop down and write. And as we were talking about before class, writing is like an art or an athletic endeavor. I mean, it is physical, it's of the body. And whatever you need from the discussion that we've had will come with you, but you don't need to drag it with you. You don't need to, it's not a multiple choice test. And in fact, you don't need to do anything I've mentioned on the handout or in the conversation. All you need to do is write. You're going to kind of take the spirit of free writing with you. And you'll hear me say things like, you could play with, or you might want to try. We're looking to the examples for tools and opportunities, permission, chances to take, and just sparks. But none of it happens. You just go to the page and trust that writing self. And I think the conversation that happens up here actually triggers our reader self. And our reader self always knows, when you're reading a book, you're thinking, I wonder if this is going to happen, and they shouldn't have done this, and you're worried about things, and all of those anticipatory things, that's actually plot, right? You're creating plot, you're creating story, you're engaging with character. So your reader self is really smart about all this stuff. So it's actually just great to light up your reader self and then drop into your writer self, and whatever you need is going to be there. That's the number one rule. I'll talk about the second rule after we write, because really all you need is to know that one. Okay, so we are going to number one, which is why now? And this is a question I've really been struggling with because it's been one of the major issues of the novel I've been working on. Why now? What sends the character on this journey now? And what makes the character start to do something different from what they've done? What makes the yearning begin, or what makes whatever's been in the way of the yearning shift? What makes the yearning become unbearable? What makes it time to act? And so I actually pulled the two examples that you'll see here. The first one is for the alternate week from Megan Abbott's Give Me Your Hand. And you'll look at that one next week, but it's about some friends from childhood who run into each other years later in a science lab where they're going to be working together. And it's about one confronting the other after they've had a shocking conversation years and years before that estranged them. And similarly, in the one from swimming, it's about, there's a whole sort of series of events that happen. And then 10 years later, the child who was 8 at the time is now 18 and in college, and she goes after what really happened. Where did this disappeared person go to? She starts on that kind of journey 10 years later. So again, that's that question of why now? And so, what are the differences that happen that kind of stir a yearning or change a strategy? In this case, sort of passive yearning becomes active yearning or active action. And so here it is. So I'm going to read it to you, and then we'll talk about it a little bit. He is the disappeared brother. He should have found her. That was what Lila thought about her brother Aaron, and why she hadn't really ever considered looking until recently. He disappeared after Jack's accident when she was 8 years old, and he should have been the one to find her. However, when she looked one night last year after a party when her parents weren't home and could not find his social security number anywhere in the house, and after she could not find one trace of Aaron in any of her parents' drawers or conceivable hiding places, Lila, from that night on, became intent on procuring this information. Right? So you see how it moves from, okay, so she grows up a little bit, right? She gets curious. She starts looking for something that she expects to find, right? Her brother's, some trace of her brother, and it's not there. And that rhythm, that build is something we it's very human, and consequently we see it in story. We're not going to start by, hiring a private detective. I wonder what happened to my brother 10 years ago. Let me hire a private detective. Let me, fly to Europe. No, we're going to start with, let me dig around a little. Let me just find his social security number, then I can look some stuff up. Oh, wait, I can't find it. My parents have erased him, right? He's gone. Now that's a bill. So now she's intent on procuring this information, and she can't do it the easy way. So she'll have to move to the next easiest way, right? Again, for her character, the next easiest way for her character. Felicia disappeared. She'll be back. Okay. So things to play with. Think about a moment in a character's life, and you might be taking a character you're working with. It might be you from some other time in your life. It might be a character you've developed and are imagining. It might be a character who sparks in this moment because you're thinking about a moment when a person becomes convinced to act, or when a first action doesn't suffice and they have to build in their intensity of action, right? So any of those things might spark this. Welcome back. Oh, wait, she has no sound. So you're thinking about this moment. You're thinking about, hi, Felicia.
Hey, sorry.
All right, so we're looking at when is the moment that a character is going to start acting or shift it up, shift the gear up into higher gear. And then thinking about the wall they're going to bump up against, which we'll look at more in the next one as well. What's going to stop them? What's going to trigger further yearning, further curiosity? And the other thing that I like here that you might want to play with is, this he should have found her. So part of her reluctance to act is she has an idea of how it should be. So, what ideas might your character be holding about how things should be? Those expectations are very important because I think I've mentioned in the past, but some of you are new, that Ira Glass said that, each This American Life has a theme that organizes it, but he said really all of them are about, I thought this was going to happen, and instead this happened. right? That's what story is. So thinking about what is your character expecting? Your character's this character's expecting her big brother is going to come find her. Then she's expecting, well, her parents are going to have records and she's going to be able to track him down pretty easily, right? So all those expectations are what she's stumbling over. So thinking about what your character expects and doesn't expect, thinking about what they're going after that's the easy way, and then the easy way doesn't work, right? So those early moments of yearning before it intensifies. So lots of fun stuff to play with. We're just going to take like a 6 or 7 minute warm up and just go to the page. Again, don't worry about all this. Anything that sparks you, grab it, start writing. If you need it, you'll grab more. If something else comes out, that's great. Your job is just to write for the next 6 minutes until I say stop. And I will give you a 2-minute warning. Couple more minutes. Okay. So as again, usually there's a little feeling of, wait, I'm not done. I could write more. And that's such a good feeling. So it's a good practice to have the feeling of, I don't want to stop. But I'm going to interrupt you. And what I do for the first exercise almost always is go into breakout rooms, into small groups, which now we can do with this technology. And that way everybody gets to read aloud the first time, because just hearing your voice does something, hearing your words aloud, because one of the things is that there's such a gap between what you understand is happening when you're writing and what is actually happening. Usually what you understand is happening, even though it can feel good and feel exciting, there's some kind of critical component to it. So when you read it out loud, there's usually much more there than you knew. And then hearing other people's, we start to build this wonderful mix that just kind of is potent. So we'll go into groups. There'll be two, the computer just actually does it for me for the most part, which is there'll be two pairs and one trio, and we'll spend 10 minutes. So the trio, you'll have about 3 minutes per person, and the pairs will have a little bit longer. And I'll send you a note that says 2 more minutes, and then I'll kick you all out of the room. So you'll come back. So let's talk about, there's really 2 more rules. I always say there's only 2 rules, but there are really 3. So the first rule is to write. What is the second rule?
No apologies.
That's right. So the second rule is that you cannot apologize. This is really important. This is actually part of training your writer to really realize this is your time to just explore. And you can't apologize for what's on the page because you don't even know what's there yet when you've written it. You haven't even reread it maybe yet. You haven't had time to marinate, to think, upon which you'll go back and revise it anyway. So it's really good practice to show up and to not expect yourself or each other to have done anything but what you did. And therefore an apology is really not appropriate, right? Because you did it. That's all you had to do and you did it. So so it's helpful for other people as well. And I think if you were a socialized female, you got a lot of practice apologizing for showing up however you showed up, and we just don't do that here. So that's the other rule, is don't apologize. Sometimes it'll be good, sometimes it'll be bad, but you don't even know yet, so don't worry about it. And then finally, the response that I'm looking for, the response to first draft writing is, the best response is specific, honest praise. Really liked this. This really worked for me. The rhythm, this image, it was funny, whatever it is, right? Just something that caught you. And this is actually a great training for all of us. We're listening, and we're listening not only to what we're hearing, but we're attending to how do we take that in? what sort of tickles our fancy as readers? What moves us? What grabs us? What makes us ask questions? And that's the other appropriate thing, is any genuine question, because genuine questions are actually what spur readers on. So when somebody says, well, I wondered why they did that, or what's going to happen next. Often in workshops, people go back and try to fix that, try to answer it in that moment. But very often, unless it's a confusion question, it's actually a reader question, which means I wanted to know this, so I'm going to keep reading to find out. So that's it. You're just responding. Attend to your own listening, and then respond from your heart with honest, specific praise and real questions, with the enthusiasm that real questions actually imply, right? If you're sitting and having lunch with someone and you have like a million questions to ask them, it's because they're exciting and you're engaged. And that's true with writing as well. Okay, so what's going to happen is I'm going to click open all rooms, and then I don't even know, what do you get, like a little sign that says join this room? And don't lose it, like, right, because it'll go behind the other window, and I don't know that much about how to get us back there. It's a little Wizard of Ozzy. So just click on it and go on in, and then I'll bring you back at the end. Okay, so we'll do 10 minutes.
Hi.
Hey,
Hi.
you good?
Something's wrong.
Uh-oh, what's wrong?
I don't know. Oh, there it is. Okay, I see it now. Thank you.
All right, it's not really going to work, is it? And well, I don't think you're going to be able to be in here. Oh, I'll stop. I'm sorry. All right. So we did lose funding. Right. All right, I love you. All right, better unrecord the pause, unpause the recording. Okay, did we learn anything about yearning?
I think so. I think we also learned about the heavy connection between yearning and loss.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So loss was a big thread for yearning. What
Yeah,
else?
I
Were
think
there
so.
non-loss yearnings?
Well, it's because you have a sense of loss that you start yearning to get rid of it and to find out something that will end the loss, end the sense of loss, I think.
That's definitely one for sure, right? That's immediately recognizable. Well, I'm just curious if anybody's yearning, character's yearning came from something other than loss. Yeah, Francis.
I think mine was yearning for a connection.
Uh-huh. And so not necessarily a lost connection, but a new
Big
connection.
one.
Future build. Yeah. Anything else?
I think I was with Felicia, and I think that, I mean, you tell me, Felicia, if you agree, but I felt like yours was not directly connected with loss, but rather yearning for something that then, in the voice's point of view, is like inverted from what you expect. It's kind of hard to explain. Let's see. Like the speaker is talking about a man who's longing for a drink, but then the expectation of like what could happen with that is turned around because it becomes this really attractive, appealing, connecting thing between the reader or the speaker and the partner.
Yeah.
Am I getting that right, Felicia, roughly? The narrative.
Always it's always interesting to me because there's the reader responding, and then there's me writing it. And I think my feeling about yearning was, yearning for the person who's right there with you. But this, I guess it is antithetical to yearning, because she is being completed by something that others might yearn for, something that's not there.
Mm-hmm.
It did kind of reverse it, yes. And then I just want to say, on Julia's piece, it had these very subtle ways of having yearning, with these images of being in front of a house someone was returning to, and seeing that house faded now, a bag of leaves that have been left on the sidewalk. There was some way in which I felt as if the yearning was there, because all of those things to me implied the passing of things, the dying of leaves, and a house that is now faded. So I thought it had a beautiful sense of yearning without that being like an obvious thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I love both of those kinds of subtleties, because the thing about like yearning for something that's there is so human and psychological too, right? So, and then putting it in through images and through what people notice, what characters notice is, of course, one of our big tools. So, yeah. Well, I mentioned obstacles, and that's where we're going next. And of course, we talk about loss as one of the things that triggers yearning, because there's an obstacle to having, and that's sort of interesting. So if you're yearning for something that's there, then there's a psychological or other kind of obstacle, right, besides loss, that to sort of having what's right in front of you, maybe. But in any case, so we're looking at number 2. Obstacles and the forbidden create yearning. So again, I mentioned, if the character wants water and they have it, if the desire can be quickly or easily stated, the yearning it stirs will not spark a story, and certainly not a long story. But in fact, it's the obstacles and the conflicts to getting what a character wants that are going to push that character to try harder, to find another way. And again, those are the things that create growth, because there's the easy way, and then there's the way that's not so easy, and then pretty soon you're outside of your comfort zone, the character's outside of their usual route, and that means they're going to change, right? So both of these examples, the one you'll do next week that's at the bottom of the page, and then the one on the flip side that we're going to do together, are from Colson Whitehead's The Nickel Boys, and they're both about Elwood. And so Elwood, how many people have read The Nickel Boys? Anybody? No? All right. Well, it's beautifully written. I thought you read it, Eileen. Didn't you read The Nickel Boys?
Started it, but to be honest, I did not find myself able to finish it.
Okay. It's very sad, but I thought it was beautiful. Anyway, Elwood is very bright, and he's going to college early, like in lieu of or in concert with high school. And he gets a ride he hitches a ride, and from a stranger who turns out to be in a stolen car, and Elwood gets sent to this school that's sort of a reform school, and it looks really beautiful, but it's really not. It's very dark. And so at first he attempts to it is a school. He's hopeful he can still learn because that's his yearning, right? That's why he was hitchhiking to college in the first place. And the level is below where he is, and he talks to the teacher and is told, oh, we'll bring you some other books or get you some more advanced materials. And then instead he gets punished for something and he's removed from the classroom for a while. And he goes back, and so the first one is, you'll see next week, is where he's kind of grappling with the learning situation and finding his own way to keep learning when the easy way, that's asking the teacher for help, isn't going to help. And in the one that we're going to look at today, 2W which is the top of the next page, this is a little later on. And so Elwood is sent out of this, prison-like reform school for work detail in the outside world. And so now how he sees the world changes because the outside world has been forbidden, and now he's back in it. So that's the one we're going to look at. And I will just say this keeps happening. So he keeps having to push himself harder to find ways to get out of this situation. But this is this beat. The air was cool in Elwood's lungs, and everything outside the window dazzled, renewed. This or this, his eye doctor asked at checkups, a choice between two lenses of different power. Elwood never ceased to marvel how you could walk around and get used to seeing only a fraction of the world, not knowing you only saw a sliver of the real thing. This or this, definitely this, all that the van tumbled past, the sudden majesty of everything, even the falling down shotgun shacks and sad concrete block houses, the junker cars half in the weeds in someone's yard. He saw a rusty sign for Wild Cherry High C and was more thirsty than he'd ever been in his life. Right? That's yearning, right? Yearning for the high C, which in that yearning in the moment, that literal yearning, of course, resonates across all of this deeper yearning, right? I mean, yearning manifests in very concrete ways. And here it is. And it's just such a beautiful passage of yearning for what used to be ordinary, for this, not for sort of suddenly seeing more than the sliver of the thing you think, you don't realize is only a sliver, right? So it's a beautiful passage. So again, thinking about what is forbidden to your character, what's in the way of your character getting what they want, and you can play against the obstacle, and you'll get to do more of that with next week with the first example, but also maybe playing with the moment when that obstacle shifts a little bit, or what's forbidden becomes a little bit available or visible, right? So those little moments where there's a hint of like seeing or touching the thing that's yearned for, right? That's one of the things that's going on here, is that kind of this exquisite blossoming of that little moment of having that's squeezed out of this passage, right? And then thinking about the senses. I mean, kind of what Felicia was talking about with Julia's piece, those little subtle ways that what we're going to notice is going to be driven by our state of mind. And when we're yearning, or when we're given access, a little bit of access to something we've been yearning for, it's going to be very vivid to us. The air was cool in Elwood's lungs. I mean, every sense, right? And everything outside the window dazzled, renewed. And then this wonderful kind of flash to the eye doctor, this or this, the lenses of different powers, right? So just this great kind of, that becomes a stand-in for how we see the world, what lens we're looking through, right? Elwood never ceased to marvel how you could walk around and get used to seeing only a fraction of the world, not knowing you only saw a sliver of the real thing. This or this, definitely this, all that the van tumbled past, the sudden majesty of everything, even the falling down shotgun shacks and sad concrete block houses. And that's such a beautiful example of state of mind, right? So one of the great things to play with state of mind is the details are showing a different mood than you'd expect, right? That those details are quite depressing, but in thrall to this feeling of joy at being out in the world, they take on a completely different meaning, right? The junker car is half in the weeds in someone's yard. He saw a rusty sign for wild cherry high C. That doesn't sound right. If you just said a rusty sign for wild cherry high C, you wouldn't think thirst, right? You'd just be like, right? But he was more thirsty than he'd ever been in his life. So playing against those expectations, against what these triggers might have done in a different situation, but in this situation, it's not just that, you know, he sees a pot roast or a pie, right? And it's that he sees a rusty sign, that he sees a junker car, and those things flash this for him. That really gives us yearning. So lots of beautiful stuff to play with here. So take the energy of that piece and see what happens when you turn to your character. And we will do, let's do 10 minutes. couple more minutes. All righty. Let's hear some of these. So who would like to find out what you just wrote by reading it aloud to us? Discover your words. Who's first? All right, Aline.
I'll go. Thank you. Riva is my main character, and she has retreated to a room in the house she's staying. Riva sat by the bedroom window. The moon was full, glowing yellow, even though it was only 6, a reminder of how much further north she was. She could hear the chattering voices downstairs, the clatter of dishes. She hadn't eaten dinner, didn't want to, despite the unusually enticing smells wafting upstairs. The voices were all strange to her, the language not hers, despite her ability to speak it. She wanted the voice of her mother, her father, Gerhard, her friend Miriam. The list went on. She'd had such voices before, had taken them for granted until the war had scattered them so far they couldn't be heard. She joined the resistance to try to get them back, to fill her ears with their voices, their laughter. How could she get them back? How could she even reach them? The moon glowed on, the voices downstairs grew quieter, sporadic, silent. She sat a long time at the window, watching the moon shine on the fields of broken, rotting stubble, until she was so cold she had to go to bed and lie under the covers.
Gorgeous, Eileen. That's fabulous. I love it. I love the moon, and I love that you really played with some of those unexpected, like the smells wafting up the stairs are unusually enticing, and yet she doesn't want to eat, right? And then the wonderful sort of the voices she can hear downstairs versus the voices in her head, and that it's the longing to hear those familiar voices that has driven her resistance work, right? I love that, the specificity of yearning. I really buy that, and yeah, that's really beautiful. And then the going to bed, the cold, and getting under the cover. I mean, we're really in the sensual world that is absolutely in conversation with her yearning, and with the ways that like her yearning is against the grain of some of what she's experiencing, as happens in life, and yet it's still just how she still has no appetite for that delicious food, or the voices aren't the voices she longs to hear. And so then when the actual voices start to die out, it's quite poignant. Yeah, beautiful. All right, let's hear another one. All right, Frances.
Some aspects are a bit like Eileen's.
Yeah, this sometimes happens. There's like a little psychic communication.
Not exactly, but they moved from Minnesota to Southern California in 1951. For 12 years, she yearned for rain, she yearned for the green, she yearned for trees, she yearned for lakes to swim in, fresh, clean, clear water that did not coat you with salt. Today, she takes an old black and white photo of her grandmother, who sits on the porch of the steep-roofed house in Duluth. She scans it in, crops it, enlarges it. The old silver grains give such great resolution. If only she'd had that power when she was young, to conjure up her grandmother's stern mouth, the softness of her arms, the warmth of her caring. Back then, a phone call was 3 minutes long on a special occasion. There was no Skype or Facebook or shared YouTube videos of aunts and uncles and cousins. Still, no one could have shared with her the first snowflake, the tinkle of meltwater in the gutters, the summer rain. Now she'd lived away from dry, arid, smoggy Los Angeles for years. Now she'd learned that constant rain and snow and freezing temperatures were not the best conditions for enjoying the outdoors. And she'd learned the pain of knowing so many people who cannot be revisited. She took a photo of her mother standing at a Minnesota lake, scanned it, enlarged it, but there was no going back.
Beautiful. I love, again, the specificity of the trees and the plants and the lakes, that the sort of landscape that she specifically longs for. And I love the idea that she's enlarging this picture, and she wishes she could sort of have had that power in her youth, but really nobody could share or whatever, a snowflake, right? That's a beautiful kind of making vivid of what yearning is really about, and what can and can't fulfill it, right? Yeah, gorgeous. Fabulous. All right, let's hear one more. Who would like to? There's something powerful that happens when you read and then you go back in to write. So I recommend it. Give it a shot. All right, Felicia. Thank you.
6 months had passed. Now she yearned for his pulsing dots, a signal his message was nigh. Her thirst for him would be satiated. No more waiting. He was awake with her. The ocean between them no longer an obstacle to what they called being together. No more Scotland. No more America. They were in a private land, an island unto themselves. Cell phones balanced on their hearts as they lay in bed, blankets tinted like when they'd been children, hiding from no one this time. Why did they both need more darkness when they romanced on the net? Why did they bury themselves under the covers and close their eyes? She'd ask him once. So we can see each other, he'd said, laughing. She'd known he was right, under his cloak of night or hers, on opposite sides of a planet, spinning relentlessly. They loved blind.
Beautiful. I love the, the sensuality of like the pulsing dots and the sort of he was awake with her, right? This, and the sort of the literal aspect of that and the emotional aspect of that, and then the spinning relentlessly, right? That's one of those things that captures the emotion of the character in that moment. And then and the whole kind of detailing of the cell phones on the heart, and the kind of the hiding, the closing our eyes so we can see each other. I mean, it's it's beautifully written, and it's also this really interesting sort of anthropological moment too, right? That it's kind of interesting that Francis had touched on. So it's just like, I think we're all figuring out how this technology works with all of our human psychology, and it really captured that. So
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, let's do a little more yearning. The last one, and let me just mute everybody. So it's interesting. I forgot. I was thinking. Okay, normally I used to do 2 alternate week exercises, but because I'm developing full classes for Tuesday, Thursday, there are now the 3. So I'm thinking about, anyway. Not really that important, but I'm processing the pedagogy of all of this. But in the third one, which you might not get to next week, the first example is, but you can all look at it, use it, do it as a little spark yourself in the middle. But it's from Curtis Sittenfeld's story collection, You Think It, I'll Say It. And in this story, the narrator is interviewing a celebrity, a rising celebrity whom she'd interviewed a few years earlier, and they'd sort of bonded, and there was some talk of maybe they would hang out, and Nina, the narrator, the point of view character, sort of carried that with her, like that this celebrity kind of suggested they should hang out and they could be friends or whatever, and they didn't, but the celebrity, Kelsey, went on to become more famous. She's on a show. She's, becoming more famous. She's moved to LA. And Nina, meanwhile, has left New York and moved to the Midwest, become pregnant, is a single mother. And she's gotten this assignment because the famous person, Kelsey, has requested her specifically. And she flies out to New York, to LA with her baby, and leaves the baby with a, sitter from an agency, and comes to interview Kelsey. And in the middle of, as the interview's beginning, her cell phone buzzes, and it's the babysitter, and so it's that she's torn between her career and kind of continuing this professional interview, and then her baby alone with this stranger in this strange city. And that dilemma, that kind of pull, 2 yearnings pulling you in opposite directions, is another really wonderful story move, right? Dilemma. And it's that, you can have this or this, and they're both equally or almost equally good or important, or they're both equally bad, but you have to pick one, right? That's a very common story dilemma. And again, it's like they're 2 yearnings, right? Because that's what creates dilemma. If you don't care about one, if they're not in conflict, if you don't care about one, then it's not a dilemma. It's just a choice. So when the one we're going to look at is from Susan Choi's Trust Exercises, and it's about convincing oneself to yearn. And I just thought it was a nice sort of underbelly moment. So we looked at yearning triggering action, we looked at yearning pushing against and through obstacles and impossible situations. And so I wanted to look at this darker underbelly of yearning, where somebody is convincing themselves to yearn for what they maybe don't. And I think that's another human part of yearning. So divided, yearning and conflict, dilemma, and then other kind, faked yearning, you convincing yourself, what are the other kinds of ways that yearning is sort of twists and turns in us? So here's an example of, so I say, well, what should cause yearning doesn't necessarily. The heart is a strange beast. Sometimes a character might want to want something or try to want something. That gap between what we think we should want and what we do is always revealing to the reader, if not to the character. So this is a teenage girl is the point of view character. Her name is Sarah. It's third person. And Liam is this somewhat older, like 20 something. I mean, he's actually like a visiting teacher or something, sort of, yeah. Liam is within range, although she doesn't frame it to herself the same way. But the impression of inexplicable deficit, of a queer gap between outward gifts, tall, handsome, lanky, flashing eyes, dazzling smile, the fringes of his hair tangling just the right amount with his eyelashes. One could go on, and inward integrity. This Sarah notices also. So not only is there a gap between what she thinks she should want and what she does want, but there's actually this gap between how he seems very appealing externally, and yet, as we'll hear, he's not. He doesn't have a certain kind of inward integrity. So maybe the gap in him creates this gap in her yearning. She envisions a cringing creature, some naked, frightened, non-human thing, having put on Liam's body like a suit. Now it has to be vigilant, has to keep watch on the humans around it to see how to act so it isn't found out. And who was Liam keeping watch on? Martin. The vision of the creature in the Liam bodysuit had to be forcibly struck from her mind. Liam was exceptionally handsome. Sarah repeated this idea to herself as if it were a lesson. So I love that she has this, right? Isn't that great? She has this insight into this person, that he looks really good, but he's lacking some kind of inward integrity, and this whole wonderful description of his being like a frightened, non-human thing who's put on this handsome body like a suit, and now is, watching how to act, and he's watching Martin, who's this even older teacher. And so then we get to this, she says, she's got to forcibly strike this insight that she has from her mind. Liam was exceptionally handsome. Sarah repeated this idea to herself as if it were a lesson. So that's, it's kind of interesting because we get this wonderful moment of character wisdom and insight, and immediately, and of course she is a teenager, but she tries to undo it by convincing herself of the outward impression of Liam, right? So see if you can find a moment with a character where yearning is more complicated than just, when we started talking about yearning, it has such a pure, deep sense, but it also we can play with it because we're human beings and we're psychologically twisted, right? So what else happens with yearning? What are some of the underbellies of yearning, the ways we convince ourselves, the ways we look at some parts and not others? What goes against the grain of our yearning, or where do we force it? So fun stuff to play with. Let's see. Let's do, I think we can do like 12 minutes. Let's do a 12-minute one. If you need anything, just put it in the chat. Couple more minutes. Okay. Let's hear. Now, I know a couple people were not feeling great. So if you are not up for reading, which is different than feeling apologetic or insecure. But if you're not up for it, then pass. Does everyone understand the difference? It's not about being psychologically up for it. It's about being physically up for it. Okay. So that said, Sue, you want to read?
Sure.
Great.
And I'm like everyone else
Oh,
dealing with.
let me say
physical
one thing.
things.
Let me say one thing for round 3, which is if you elect on round 3 to read your first one or your second one instead of your third one, that's always fine. But what I ask is don't read both or all of them. I mean, tonight we're a really small group, but and this class is pretty small, but we just want to make sure everybody has time. So for the people who wait till the end, you even if you wrote a whole scene, you won't, you'll pick one piece of it to read. So does that make sense? Just anything you wrote in one of those chunks.
No, absolutely. So this is about 500 words. Is that
Yeah.
good?
That should be okay.
Great. And I'm following on, having found out my dog is terminal back in the US. And this is the second visit. I arrived at SFO mid-morning on Sunday, having flown out the same date a few hours later in Sydney. The day my plane landed, Boo stopped eating, and peanut butter, one of his favorites, didn't tempt him to take a bite. I picked up a Mini Cooper from the rental place, knowing I needed a familiar comfort car for this visit. I called Jana, who asked me how quickly could I get to them. Straight away, I answered. Still, I stopped to pick up a container of blue cheese crumbles at the nearest market on my way, remembering his puppy escapade of chewing into a shipping box through 3 layers of cardboard and foil to access a pound of Stilton, a Williams-Sonoma Christmas present from a friend. He'd eaten a third of it, a tenth of his body weight at the time, and suffered no ill effects other than sleeping more soundly than usual that night. Jana was house sitting in Bernal Heights at an amazing 3-level home with decks, views, and a garden. It belonged to a woman who taught yoga and held spiritual classes, especially for women, and the decor reflected this essence, all polished wood, Buddhist iconography, and mats and pillows scattered about. I was grateful it was such a beautiful big place where Boo would spend his final hours. The weather was sunny and perfect. When I arrived, he was on the couch, propped up in his sheepskin box bed. He actually struggled to his feet when he saw me and tried to jump off the couch towards me, but I caught him before he fell. His breathing was so labored and his chest so swollen, I couldn't hold him on my lap without making him uncomfortable. I sat next to him and stroked his back gently while Jana and I discussed the options. She knew a vet that made house calls for this purpose, and she left a message for her, and I went online to find backup. Not easy on a Sunday. Boo was clearly miserable and ready to go. Seeing my exhaustion, Jana had me lie down with him, and we actually slept together in a version of our favorite position, his head on my stomach, for an hour until he needed to move. We sat on the deck in the sun, and I did everything I knew he loved, gently scratching the top of his butt, rubbing his head, and finally tickling his ears, which made him close his eyes and relax in the warmth. It's such a beautiful sunny day for San Francisco. I whispered to him what a good dog he was and how brave he was and how much I loved him. I also apologized for leaving him and moving to Australia and told him I think of him many, many times a day. Several times I offered him a piece of blue cheese, and once he actually took some in his mouth, but then dropped it.
Oh my God, it's so sad. That's fabulous. I mean, I'm just like, I love the peanut butter is a great detail. This cheese, and especially at the end about like trying to put it in his mouth and, you know, dropping it. The mention of the weather, like you mentioned, it's interesting because it comes up as, you know, the weather's sunny and perfect, and it comes back again. Did everyone notice that, like that second rip? And it was like, I don't know, it was sort of felt like the wonderful contrast of this weather to this moment. And then when he struggles to his feet and catching him, and I actually wanted to sort of even like, what does it feel like? Was he heavy? Was it, you know, like I just wanted another beat of that. And actually also with the stopping for the cheese, I wanted like one more beat of scene there too. Like, because I know that, like, was it a feeling of being hurried or like, you know what I mean? Like panicky, or was it like, I need this sort of, so just kind of one more beat of that moment. And then just apologizing for moving and then curling up. I mean, just, it's a very moving scene, just taking us beat by beat through all of that, you know? Yeah. Powerful. Thank you. So Eleanor, do you want to read or?
Sure, I'll read. When I found out I had cancer, a rare form called clear cell carcinoma, I was driving to writing group with a plate of cookies in my car. It was dark and only 9 days before Christmas. My doctor had been leaving messages and then missed calls for a few hours. Finally, in the car, we connected, and I heard her voice echo through the Subaru's sound system, the little green phone icon lit up in the dark. Eleanor, it's Anne. I have some difficult news. Time slowed in that way it does when the awful is about to smack you in the face. The biopsy came back. You have a very rare form of cervical cancer. I was on Danville Boulevard, concentrating on the brake lights of the car ahead of me, a necklace of red lights on the cars slowing for the traffic light at Livorno Road, a line of pretty glowing light. I gripped the steering wheel. Uh-huh, I said, nodding as if she were in the car with me. It's not caused by HPV, she said. That's why your HPV test came back negative. I could smell the butter and sugar in the cookies seeping through the saran wrap. It seemed urgent to take them to my group. She said, where are you now? In the car, I said, driving to my writing group. I want you to turn around and go home and be with your husband, she said. I jolted. Oh, yes, home, husband, of course, that's what I should do. I signaled and pulled into a gravel turnout. I thought I'd just take the cookies and drop them off, I explained, realizing as I spoke the words that they seemed ridiculous. I laughed. No, 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 Anne said. You'll create upset for them and you. I laughed again. You're right, I said. Okay, I'm turning around. I knew I should have a million questions, but all I wanted was to turn on the car and head back home with my cookies. Just keep moving.
Fabulous. The the setup and the cookies and the dark and 9 days before Christmas, and then her voice and the detail of the light, the green light, and the voice over the sound system of the Subaru. I mean, it's just that wonderful mix of the mundane and the specific with this momentous moment. And then the line of pretty glowing lights. It's just a great job of like those little pieces that of observation that build the whole mood, that reflect what's going on. I love when the butter and sugar seep in through the saran wrap, and then that it seemed urgent to take them to the writing group, and how that whole where should I go, what should I do next becomes, the whole dilemma, right? The whole
Right.
figuring out, and it just plays so beautifully, and this doctor and kind of figuring out what to do, and making that shift is really powerful. It's really, really beautiful. I don't know how to say his last name, but the New Yorker art critic Peter, like SCHJ something, right? He just wrote a piece about being told in a car that he had cancer. And it's like, who
really?
does this while people are driving? I don't know how his last, it's a powerful article. Let's see if I can, there we go. Peter, SCHJELDAHL. That's his
Oh
name.
my God.
Yeah, it's an article in the New Yorker. But anyway,
Is it in the current issue?
it might be the week, but it's like December. It's a December.
Okay.
But anyway, but the car thing was just like, no, who tells people news while they're driving? But anyway, fabulous scene. Thank you. Catherine, how are you doing? You want to read or pass?
You talk to me?
Yes.
I'll read something.
Wonderful.
Let me see. Let me read this one. I had done some of them before. Yeah. Leave education to the professionals, reddened Carlos's ears. How could Mr. Diago possibly say that after Carlos threw all caution to the wind to explain to his principal just how bad things were for Latinos and kids of poverty? No classes, or classes that gave them a diploma, and nothing to enable them to enter university. He seemed as if Carlos wasn't in his line of vision. He looked over his head, but never met Carlos's gaze. Carlos got the impression Mr. Diago lived in a bubble world, apart and alone from the kids from whom he was responsible. In other words, they were invisible to him. He couldn't see them, couldn't imagine their worlds, and perhaps even questioned whether they had one. A series of colorful images passed over Carlos's imagination. The dancing at the quinceañera parties, the tamale Christmas parties, and dozens of other rituals and activities that had unique meaning in their world. Carlos shivered at the thought of Mr. Diago's world being aloof, lonely, and alone.
Yeah, good. I love starting with leave education to the professionals, and this kind of door shutting. And I love the phrase a bubble world, that he lived in a bubble world, and actually it actually made me want to see him more in that moment. So I think you've done this beautiful job of capturing the emotion and the details of the memory of the dancing and the tamales. But I would love to then have you interweave some more details of the actual world, the actual scene of this exchange. Like, what does he notice about what this man actually looks like, or the way he stands, or the things that are also going to kind of dance with the descriptions of his bubble world and of his standing apart, and maybe even not knowing that, that the point of view characters people have this other world, their own, yeah, beautiful. Great.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And last but definitely not least, Julia.
Let's see. I'm going to read the second one. Tea? Sure, that sounds good. We don't have a lot of options, James said, walking Allie to the church kitchen. The linoleum was a strange shade of peach or bleached salmon, and the tables and chairs were covered with teens' winter coats and gloves. Allie could hear the kids' voices chatting away in what must have been an adjacent rec room. James clicked on the kettle and leaned back on the counter watching it boil. But Allie was struck by a pair of ski gloves on the table. Suddenly it was 1982 and she and James were in his Opel, parked in the lot outside the stadium. More specifically, she was touching James' navy blue ski gloves, his hand resting on the stick shift, cold air filling the car and their warm puffs of breath dappling that air. James's gloves, the leather tips and the nylon with its tiny grid pattern.
Beautiful. I love how that detail has such sort of passion and yearning in it, to attend to and carry a detail like that, a sensate detail like that across time, means something, right? I mean, it gives us this intensity of focus and of memory. And I love that the ski gloves are like the Madeleine that kind of jumps her back into this memory. And then before that, just the going right into the sensate world of the scene, the peach or bleached salmon, the click of the kettle, right? So sound and visual, that he's leaning on the counter watching the kettle boil. So there's, all of those details suggest some of the tension and emotion between them, but not by foregoing the literal, right? But in fact by embodying the literal. So yeah, beautiful.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. So fabulous. What we are going to finish up with, because we actually go till 8:15, but is I just want to talk a little bit about goals and have you set goals for the quarter and for then for either the week or 2 weeks, depending on whether you're coming back in a week or 2 weeks. So and just to say a few things about goals, and then we'll put them in the chat. If you don't know about the chat, if you scroll down to the bottom and click the dialogue icon, the chat will open to your right and it says type message here. And if you type a message and hit enter, it'll appear above and to everybody. And you can also send individual messages, passing notes in class. And actually, I forgot to say this at the beginning, but it's a great way, some of you know this, but it's a great way to add your own comments to mine when we're responding to people, to add your own specific, concrete, honest praise right there. And so that ends up being an extra kind of wonderful way for people to get, cheer each other on with that honest praise. Goals also go in the chat, and we usually start the class with checking in about the goals we set in the last class. So what I recommend with the goals is that you make them very concrete and specific, and that you either make them pretty small, or you maybe have a goal and a reach goal. So that a goal you'll know you're going to do no matter what, even if you do it right before class, and a goal that maybe you're aiming for, and then we're providing cheerleading and accountability. The other thing is you're going to practice in the class wording your goals or designing your goals in such a way that they are inspiring to you and clear to you and seem very doable to you. So for some people, that might be a time goal. I'm going to write for 10 minutes a day. I'm going to set a timer and write for 10 minutes a day. Or I'm going to write a sentence every day, or an hour, or 500 words, or it might be I'm going to check in with a friend and about my goals every day. I'm going to text somebody that I've started writing, and I'm going to let them know when I've stopped. It might be I'm going to announce how many words I've written on, whatever the new Facebook is of the moment, on Twitter or Instagram. So it's just about finding goals that are not, I should do this, I ought to have done this, but what's juicy, what's exciting, what makes you kind of be like, ooh, I did this. And or, oh, I know I can do this. So even though I'm tired, that was the one sentence. I had a student who had 2 little kids, and she just felt like opening the thing was the hardest part. And so she really committed to 1 sentence a day. And sometimes she'd get out of bed. Oh, I forgot to do my sentence, exhausted, and just do 1 sentence. But it didn't matter. It meant every day she was opening it. So for her, that goal really worked. And sometimes she would do more than 1 sentence, but it meant she was doing the hard part of opening it and touching it and getting the next thing. And she finished and published a book. So what is a goal that's going to work for you? And here's the thing. You'll find out in a week or 2 weeks when you check in about it, if it worked. And if it didn't, you'll adjust it. So you're really attending to what works for you. All right, they are coming in. So Julia's is to incorporate the baby scene work from craft into the book in a year 70 scenes. Great. And Aline has a near goal by the next class to fill in a gap in her novel, which is a chapter of about 10 pages, I think. She says, I want to do this, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. Yes, that is the secret to anything done. My stretch goal is to finish my novel in 2020 and get it out. Raw. Felicia says, goal I know I'll do before the next class, write several short free writes each day. Great. Reach goal, print out rough draft of my internet story. Wonderful. Francis, my goal is to write 2 hours every morning whenever possible. And if not, to put in an hour in the evening. That's great. I like that flexibility. Finishing the last 4 chapters. Awesome. Keep them coming. Eleanor, write 300 words daily on anything, but probably more about cancer. Take naps. Beautiful. It's a perfect goal. Yeah.
By the way, I feel like I should tell everyone I had surgery 3 weeks after that night when I got the diagnosis. From diagnosis to surgery, 3 weeks. I had it all taken out, and it was stage 1, no spread, no further treatment, just surveillance. So just in case you were wondering.
No, yeah, you don't want to leave us with readers' questions.
No.
For the book, right?
No.
Yes, bravo, bravo. Catherine says to craft at least 3 scenes in revision. Great. Sue, to keep sketching out, editing my in-between scenes from the book in a year signposts. Yeah, good. Well done, everybody. This is a wonderful group. Oh, also, if you have any craft topics you're grappling with, and you don't have to know exactly how to word it or whatever, but if there's anything you're struggling with in your writing, it probably relates to a craft topic. And I create the classes one by one as we go, more or less, or sometimes I do a couple. So I do them in response to what you or I are grappling with. So please let me know if there are, and you can let me know right now, and you can also email me. But is there anything that's up for folks around craft?
I just have a logistical question, not a craft question.
Okay, too.
I'm a little confused about every other week versus weekly. Is the Wednesday class meant to meet every other week?
Yes.
Then can you optionally join another class?
So here's the deal. So the class meets every other week. And then what happened is, so I used to meet every week, and then I switched it every other week, and I changed my pricing and whatever. So I went down to 6 weeks, 6 classes. You get 6 lessons. But the Tuesday group kept meeting every other week. And I thought, well, that can happen with the online group as well. And Felicia, over time, at first it was rotating, but I asked her if she would sort of anchor that. And so Felicia shows up in the in-between weeks here online at the same time the class meets for 1 hour, and does the alternate week, or now it'll be 2 of the alternate week exercises with whomever wants to show up. So an email will go out the day before saying tomorrow is alternate week. I've actually scheduled those now. And if you can just reply and let her know if you're coming, you know.
I see. So it's kind of like a little additional thing for a shorter time where you can just write.
Well, it's still the exercises because I've created these other
Yeah.
exercises. So it's the same lesson, but extended. Yeah. So you do 2 rounds of writing and reading.
I see.
And
And
it's,
is that going to be on Wednesday night also, or is that on Tuesday night then?
no. So the Wednesday group is always Wednesday.
I see.
I
Okay.
teach 3 versions. I don't know, Felicia, do you want to say anything else about it?
We enjoy it, and it's just really fast. And we just read the exercises, and then we write for the free write, and then we read them aloud to each other.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's just like a bonus, like a, you know, it's just a freebie bonus.
Okay, I put a piece into the chat thing about interiority, which I'm hoping we will cover at some point.
Oh, fabulous.
Okay.
Ah. I'm going to copy and paste that right into my file of you know, these topics. So that's a great one. And yeah, that's a great one. Any other? So that's interiority. Short answer, interweave, but we'll get to that.
That's fine. I mean, a lot of what I wrote this evening was actually interiority.
Uh-huh.
I know that if I took that to my group now, they say, oh, it's just more talking. You need more action. Well, I want to know that how to make interiority so that people don't go, oh, snooze.
I love talking about interiority. So that's a great.
Oh, good. Well, we'll fit right in then.
Yes. All right. Oh, dialogue. And we're going to do dialogue next week. Is there anything specific you'd like? I have created the handout, but if there's anything specific you'd like to know.
Just that, you know, I get hung up on she said, he said. It's sort of like working with the parts that are outside the quotes and balancing them with what's inside the quotes. That kind of thing.
Yes. Okay, great. So, and you know, feel free, like even after, because there's so much with dialogues. We're going to do the class, but feel free to kind of even ask me questions as we go too, because we can definitely talk about that. And then Catherine, that's a great one too. Pushing yourself out of exposition. So, and in what directions do you need pushing? Like action, scene?
Just maybe a list of alternatives.
Okay, great. I love it.
Okay, something like that.
I love it. That's great. Moving between present and past tense. Do you mean like flashbacks and different? Is that what you mean, Sue?
Well, I think it's because, I mean, memoir is not my usual thing. And so for me, it's kind of, it seems much more immediate when you talk about it in present tense, but then I know I don't know, it feels a little odd. So it's that tension.
Oh, present tense and past tense, like different tenses.
Right. Like I was there as opposed to that happened and there's a remove. And present tense always just feels a little more dramatic, but you know.
Right. I remember actually years and years ago hearing Bob Shakochis speak, and he said something about people writing in present tense as if now was the only news. I just love that line. As if, but yeah. And actually, in some ways, present tense can almost be slow-mo, right? Sometimes it's actually, it can feel immediate, but also it can feel slow-mo because we don't actually talk in very often. We don't narrate what we're doing in present tense. It's a little bit odd if we said, I'm sitting here talking to all of you. I'm writing down what you're saying. So so it's kind of interesting to play with. Yeah, for sure. Good. What else? Sue. Aline backs up Sue. Yes. This is great, guys. Anything else? Yeah, Francis.
Yeah, and I just wonder, I write just fine to myself, except I just keep thinking, where do people get all these wonderful, colorful expressions and these colorful descriptions? And I was just listening to someone on television. It's a long story, but he says, and the man threw the skull into the bush like a wilted cabbage.
Oh,
And, you know, I just don't come up with many interesting things like that. And maybe that's just me, or maybe there are ways to work on it.
Yeah, that's, I mean, I think partly our own kind of grooves of thought are, you know, are sometimes just, we're used to them, right? But I think also some of that is about permission, playfulness, you know, they're sometimes just reading some of those really beautiful, wild, crazy descriptions kind of puts us in the mood, and we go take a risk. Yeah. Felicia.
I wanted to say something about that. A person freed me up with those, using things from your family probably had sayings. When you remember your family has sayings. So then we just started listing those family sayings and then letting them enter our writing. And that really made a difference for me. It really changed me from a formality of how we were trained to write to the freedom of, you know, oral, what we've heard and what people say. The beautiful metaphors of a generation that was more attached to the land, for instance, than we are now. And so you'll remember some of those sayings of an aunt, a grandmother, the way they very colorful language.
That's fabulous.
I have a okay. So I was thinking about this because I had this thing about my dog. The reason we even discovered what was wrong with him is because we thought he had a chicken bone. He'd eaten another chicken bone. I was really considering the phrase literally stuck in his craw.
Oh.
I had to think, well, literally, I don't think dogs have a craw.
Whatever craw is.
Definitely stuck wherever. But I just couldn't, I ended up not using it because it didn't seem authentic.
But it is interesting when those sort of sayings come to life. We're like, what is that? Yeah.
I mean, picking up on what Felicia said, if something comes to your head, you got to write it down and save it I save it in online, and I've got a sheet of phrases.
Yeah,
and
I know.
I'm
definitely going to do that in class. Don't let me forget, because that, you know, if we had more time, I'd do it right now. But I think that would be a great way to start a class, is just put those in the chat and see what comes up. So. Yeah.
And craw is a real thing.
It is a real thing.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah. Like turkeys and stuff.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah.
But again, I was not totally sure. So I was like, and when you say literally, that's a whole minefield.
Yeah, the literally is one thing, but the craw would have been hilarious, at least to a different generation, which I think me and Celeste probably understand, right?
Well, I've got the same age problem, so.
I think it depends on where you grew up, honestly. So,
I'm always being told you can't use that word. Nobody understands it in North America. And I thought, shoot me now.
I'm telling you, they do in rural Ohio. They absolutely do.
Yeah.
And they did.
Sorry. So make some notes through the week, and if you're able, come back next Wednesday and do some more writing with Felicia. And in 2 weeks, I will see you. And I think our schedule is mostly every other week, but I sent you the dates, and every once in a while I've shuffled things around. But we'll keep talking about it. And yeah, thank you. It has been wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
The video tomorrow. All right.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.